Hey, this is Eternal King here. I want to talk about a subject that's pretty important to me, and that's the major differences between the Eternal format and the Standard format. So previously I've talked about, Standard in the context of decks, what's popular, why it's good. Typically it's very one-dimensional factors like the Nora deck runs a lot of pie tosses, therefore, and runs a lot of Conchologists, therefore it's a good deck, and then it finishes you off with Broadmane, and then that's all it does, and so it's a good deck. Something like a lot of the aggro shells or aggro mid-range beater shells, they open swing really hard, and that's why they're good decks. That's typically how Standard goes. And, it's like open swings really hard, tends to have a lot of removal cards, tends to have a lot of removal, oh, not this one, but the other Nora deck tends to have a lot of removal cards. So the way the Standard decks are constructed is exceptionally straightforward. And it's always open swing, and then ping to remove. And that's basically the entire format. There's very little committing to plays. There's very little swim style of play, which is, again, playing something that is unusual, that is exceptionally synergistic, or, again, winning on, kind of monumental plays, burst victories, things like that. It's not very common in LOR anymore in the Standard format. In Eternal, however, those things are still very much alive and well. Um, you think of something like Jace Lux, right? So Jace Lux is a very popular Eternal deck, and it is 100% all in on leveling Jace and leveling Lux, and then getting, lasers, double removal to face, things like that. Like, that is how an Eternal deck functions. It's very high commitment. That's the nature of the format. Now, what happened is a lot of the competitive players in the Runeterra scene didn't like how, I guess to them, they thought that Eternal was a one-dimensional format. Or at least it wasn't the one dimension that they enjoyed. They enjoyed the open swings. They enjoyed the again, the way that you can pilot any deck to be the same, right? Like, this is a Standard deck at 52%, and you pilot it by open swinging hard for value and not committing to the Zed or the Gwen, and just kind of biggest open swing wins, and that's how you win with this deck. But then if you go to the Annie aggro deck, this is also how you win with this deck. You don't level the Annie, you don't care about that, you're just open swinging as hard as you can. And then, on the polar end of the spectrum, the only other deck that is viable in Standard is the ones where you're just basically blocking with chumpers and then removing at fast speed. And that's the other deck. And this one runs like that, and then the Nora deck runs like that as well. So the nice thing about Standard being a more limited format than Eternal is that every deck at either end of those spectrums is going to play the same. There is no real difference. The Eternal Dragon Ramp Shell doesn't level Eternal Elder Dragon ever, and it doesn't level Volibear ever. You'll never see Volibear flip in the Standard Ramp Shell. In my Eternal Ramp Shell, Volibear flips all the time. Elder Dragon will never flip in this shell, but he will flip in something like this, where you're running, you're running the avalanches and seismic shards. Seismic shard dealing 7 damage to a unit is going to flip Volibear very easily. You can flip the A-Soul, you have to feel the rush, the She Who Wanders, and it's very, very high synergy, very, very champ flip oriented. And typically, a lot of the most competitive players in Runeterra haven't enjoyed that style of play. So they demanded a new format called Standard, where every single deck could be essentially piloted the same way. Again, something similar could be said about Eternal, where every single deck instead gets piloted based on turbo flipping certain champions, and that's how Eternal plays. And it's just a matter of preference. I don't want to say that one is better than the other. I like Eternal because it's more flip centric, more synergy heavy. A lot of the decks and cool strategies can emerge from the larger card pool. I typically don't like Standard because it's either you're the aggressor with the open swings or you're the ping heavy removal deck, and then there's very little of interest in between. those two spectrums. And, you know, it's not like something like Jace Lux where at least you get to watch the Jace flip and he has a cool animation and then he's double pinging face and like that deck does a lot of cool stuff and there's lasers and things like that. You know, I'll always take Jace Lux over, say, Nora, Elder Dragon, Do Nothing. If I had to choose a control deck to run into, I would rather do Jace Lux all day long. So, you know, again, that was a little conversation about the difference between the formats and, you know, how they, one is not necessarily better than the other, but they are exceptionally different. And I'm not a big standard guy, never have been. But again, a lot of, you know, big standard players hate Eternal, you know, so it's really kind of up to you. You know, Rise is another great example of a high synergy control deck that actually does something. Rise has a cool animation, and then he swings and OTKs you. The healing deck with Tom Kench, you know, can flip the landmark and OTK you. Fiora can OTK you. There's just like a lot of cool decks and interesting play patterns, as opposed to, are you the aggro mid-range beater shell or are you the ping heavy control deck? And those are kind of the, you know, that's the rock paper scissors there. In Eternal there is no rock paper scissors. It's just like a million different things. It's rock paper machine gun, nuclear missile, hand grenade, and so again that's going to be more appealing to certain players than others. But anyway, that's my, you know, talk about the difference between formats. This is Eternal King signing out.